How's it going?
Okay. Good. How about you?
Not bad, not bad. It's bright sunshine in Atlanta. I'm a happy camper. Well,
Okay.
and I'm indoor in the air conditioning. So
Yes.
yeah,
But how is the weather? What's the temperature there?
it was I think like 80 something, the low 90s when we flew in yesterday, and it was just barely misting. I mean, there was like some slight rain, but not bad. And only like a 30% humidity. That's way better than what I was expecting for Atlanta.
Yeah, I would have expected to be a lot higher.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna make fun of Richie because I looked at Miami weather, but Miami's like 65% humidity, so
Ah,
I got off easy.
yeah.
How's it now? You know what's really funny too? So I was walking around with Erica 3, 4 nights ago, and we were talking about the weather in Chicago. We were out like having a drink at this, out on the docks, and I pull up San Diego weather, and I'm like, look at this, because it was 93, 92, 93 in Chicago, and it
Oh,
was 66 in
yeah.
San Diego. She was like, yes, I want that so bad.
It's going to warm up this weekend. They're seeing some news articles about heat alerts. It's going to be 20 degrees higher than the usual average.
And
I
was
won't
that
be
in
in
like in
town,
the
so
80s or?
it won't impact me.
What and how many is it like typical to have air conditioning out there or not? Do a lot of homes
I'd
not have air
say
conditioning?
no. No, most of the homes are built in the 50s and 60s and 70s. Our home was built in 1970, I think 1972, and it had central heat, and I had to have air conditioning. So
Yeah,
my father-in-law, he was a air conditioning guy, so he did it all for, well, for free, except we had to pay for all the, the parts.
materials.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, when we first moved in, it was 95 degrees, and and I was like 6 or 7 months pregnant with Andy, so
Oh,
it was horrible, and we added air conditioning after he was born, so a few months later after we moved in.
at least you already have the ducts and everything, so it's not too
Exactly,
hard.
yeah, it
Yeah.
wasn't a big deal.
We happened to be out there for some class or something, and we were just driving up the coast, up the Pacific Coast Highway, and house literally on the highway on a cliff overlooking the
Yeah.
ocean, and it was an open house, so we just drive in, and we're walking through the house, and Erica turns to the realtor and goes, "Does this have air conditioning?" And the realtor just like, "No, why would it have air conditioning? It's on the cliffs overlooking the," and she
Yeah.
just had this epiphany of, what, why would you not have AC?
Yeah, I don't
She
think it's
couldn't.
needed down there. It's usually too cold to even go down to the beach. I mean, a lot of times the
Yeah.
weather is just way different on the coast than it is where people actually live. You know,
Yeah.
most
Yes.
people can't live on the coast. It's pretty expensive.
No.
I'm
Holy
about, I don't know,
cow.
15 miles inland or so. It gets
Yeah.
toasty out here.
I just still can't believe I used to go looking up and like Zillow up and down the coast and looking to see, I'm like, somewhere in here there must be somewhere affordable on the ocean. Nope. Nope.
Yeah, even if you
Mm,
live like in a place called Ocean Beach, I have an
yeah.
old coworker that lives there. She bought her house a long time ago, but it's a small one-bedroom house, and I don't know what it's worth now, but it's a really small house, and it's unaffordable. I mean, she could not buy the
Mm,
house these days, but
yeah.
it's definitely
Those are,
cheaper in Ocean Beach than it is in other locations.
yeah. Oceanside, we looked at places, and like a 2 or 3 bedroom was $2 million,
Mm,
on within walking distance of that. I'm like, no,
yeah.
come on,
Pacific
come
Beach
on.
is probably doable. The only problem is there's a lot of college kids, a lot of apartments, and
Uh,
even on the house rentals, they cram so many students into those houses to afford the rent. But it's a party town.
yeah. No thanks. No thanks.
You'll probably be interested in the downtown high rises, since you're so used to that.
I am, yeah, like something with a doorman and, easy walking to coffee shops
Mhm.
and restaurants and all that. We're very big
Yep.
on that. Plus, I'm gone so much that I always feel better when Erica's in a high rise and no one can just walk
Yeah.
up to the window and knock.
Yeah.
We lived in West Michigan for, I guess, like a year, and you couldn't see your next door neighbor from the house,
Mm.
and there were no street lights, so after dark, the whole area is just pitch black. And deer would come up to the house and be looking in the windows, and that just the
Yeah.
dog would freak
Oh,
out.
that would probably scare me, until I knew what it
Yeah,
was.
Well, yeah, you turn around and you look, and there's at eye level, there's some
Yeah.
big animal that's like, oh.
Yeah, I'm going
Like,
backpacking this weekend to climb a really tall peak in Southern California, and we talked to the rangers last weekend at a different hike, and it's a nearby hike last weekend, and they said there's a confirmed bear in where you're staying for the campground that we're going to hike into. I was like, oh, great.
oh boy.
Doing a little research on
Oh
what to
boy.
expect, and I have to carry a heavy bear canister to hide, to put all the food in there, sunscreen, chapstick, anything that has a scent needs to go inside the bear canister and away from your tent at night. And then we'll be hiking the entire following day. The second day is 19 miles of hiking, so I'll probably have most of the scented stuff on me anyway. So I have to have nutrition with me most of the time. So
What's your elevation gain on that?
it's a lot. 5,000 or so. I think this one maybe maybe 6,000. We're hiking in 7 miles, so we're going to take care. It's a 26-mile total hike, so we're taking care of some of the elevation and some of the miles. And then the next morning we have to go. So we're going up 7 miles on Saturday, and then going up 6 miles on Sunday, but then coming down 13 miles on Sunday. So
that is just insane.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're going to come home and eat all of the food.
Everything.
All of the food.
But 19 miles is a long time. Even if we start at 6 a.m., it's going to take all day. So we're going to be home really late. So I'm going to have to pack a lot of food.
Ben Biozel says, that sounds way too much like work. Well, thankfully, that's kind of what you have to do in this line of work. If you're going to sit behind a desk all the time, you got to go get out and,
It's a stress reliever. I call it my psychologist's office.
Like, oh, that's good. I like that.
Helps with mental stuff.
And Angie Walker is here. Dun, dun, dun.
Reddick.
Howdy, man.
Reddick.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Well, yeah, you mentioned you go to
older
webinar.
one.
Yeah.
I haven't played around with it in GoToWebinar, but I have been changing it slowly everywhere. I just mailed out the fidelity form and blah blah stuff for Erica.
Yeah.
I was really bad. I was like, oh yeah, that stuff you asked me to do. On that.
Well, we're right on time. Do you want to ask the questions this week?
Yeah, I'll ask questions.
Skip Carlos's, because I answered that one leading up to the show.
Okay. So no questions. Just kidding. There's at least one, but everybody else, we've got 72 people on and 2 questions. So
I bet it doesn't show you the questions that came in before you arrived. All right, so I'll ask it.
I can see. Yeah. Well, I arrived. No, I can see. It's almost 7 p.m. here in Greece. From there down.
Oh, okay, yeah, all right.
So Bruno says he has an instance with several DBs, and suddenly a couple of them became unavailable, and the physical disk where the data log files disappeared. No Windows events. How can he audit what happened at SQL Server level?
Unlikely a SQL Server problem. I've encountered this many times. You got to talk to your sysadmins. You got to talk to your SAN admins, server admins. They've got to take a look. Something happened. It's almost certainly not a SQL Server issue.
Yeah, if your drives disappeared, it's probably not SQL Server's fault.
And when the drives disappear, I don't know that you would see a Windows event, because it's unless there's like some kind of error message that pops up from the SAN or whatever. I'm assuming it's a SAN, but
you would eventually see a SQL Server error once it finally has to write to disk. I mean, it's going to be a little bit before that happens, since SQL Server does everything in memory, so it's not going to know about it for a while. But the checkpoint, any kind of writing to disk, it's finally going to start throwing errors, and those should be posted in the event log.
Backups.
Yeah. We've encountered weird bugs on like Cisco hardware that caused it, and just various weird things. But it has happened numerous times, across many servers, many different hardware platforms, different SANs. It just happens.
And I think it's usually just human error. I mean, like Robert Davis, fellow Microsoft Certified Master, just ran a blog post on how he was like, even I screw up, drops the wrong one, and all his database transactional logs disappeared. So.
Oh yeah, I've dropped 2 databases from Prod before. 2 separate occasions I have dropped a database from Prod. Thankfully both were quick enough recovery, and the second one was not really, turned out not really used, so that was okay, but okay.
It's a matter of time. That's how you become a senior too. You have to have those experiences.
It's true though. I feel like. Go ahead. Oh, I was just gonna say I feel like something that I've met people having only been a DBA for 3 years. I run into people who have been DBAs for 10 years, and I know things they don't, only because it's things I've experienced that they never did, because maybe they were a smaller shop and I worked in bigger places. Just all about what experience you had.
Yeah. Everything that involves replication. Tara knows everything.
Somebody already. Since Tara's here, blah, blah, replication question.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right. Well, Constantinos, I butchered your name, I'm sorry. He has a long-winded, easy question. Basically, they're trying to look for a good monitoring tool for production servers. They're looking specifically for health monitoring that can alert them when something happens or is going to happen. So don't get Ignite. It's not in your list, but don't get Ignite. So he's looking for a full-rounded solution. They've tested a bunch: Spotlight, Foglight, Redgate, SQL Sentry, Idera. Do we have any favorites that that we would point them to for a health monitoring and for SQL alerting?
SQL Sentry provides both with the Performance Advisor and then the Event Manager tools, I believe. So both of those together can give you everything you need. At previous jobs, we use SQL Sentry at my last job, but in previous jobs we use Spotlight. I wasn't a big fan of Spotlight. It was great for looking at certain things. I did set up some availability group alerts, but it wasn't as comprehensive as I wanted. And so we also had Foglight, which I think is now called Performance Analysis, and then we had SCOM, so Microsoft's System Center Operations Manager with the SQL Server Management Pack. But SQL Sentry, their two big tools, did replace SCOM and the performance analysis tool for us at the time. But it's pretty expensive. SCOM plus another tool is not as expensive, but SCOM requires almost a full-time monitoring person that knows how to use it. It's very complicated.
Yeah.
I don't have any. I've used all of them too. I'm fine with all of them. It comes down to personal preference.
Yeah.
Did he mention Dell's? That's Spotlight, right? Dell's Spotlight.
Yeah, Spotlight and Foglight.
Foglight's
the names that we used to call them. I think that it's performance analysis, I think. But people do still refer to it as Foglight.
Yeah.
They renamed it again.
Oh, they did? They went back to Foglight? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yep.
They're probably sick of people calling it Foglight. It's like, well, we should just call it that too.
Yeah.
A friend of mine calls them Fog Spot. He's like, I don't know which one. I just call it Fog Spot.
Yeah, one of them. Yeah.
Scott throws out SolarWinds Database Performance Analyzer, and I actually would veto that because that's what Ignite became. And I'm sorry, I'm not a big SolarWinds product fan, just because their alerting has been horrible in my experience. So sorry about that.
We demoed SolarWinds, and I forget which product it was. It wasn't that one though. At 2 jobs ago, we were trying to replace SCOM and Foglight. I was moving from a large company to a smaller company. Part of the company was sold to another business, and SolarWinds didn't provide what we needed. It was what they were showing us was purely for performance, and we needed alerting, and they could not support SQL Server 2005. And unfortunately, we were still running 2005, and I think a lot of companies still are, and it. They had removed support for it.
All right, so we will move along. Let's see, not that one. We will go to Nate with the transactional replication. They have a setup where often it gets stalled. They get stalled transactions from the quote alert for undelivered commands job. Any thoughts?
Stalled transactions. I probably need to see the full error. So undelivered, so it probably means that it's sitting at the distributor and it hasn't been sent to the subscriber. I would take a look at the throughput. Take a look at the distributor and the subscriber. See if there's any kind of CPU issue. Possibly it's just a lot of data got pushed through. Yeah, I don't know about for undelivered commands. Usually it's a bottleneck on the publisher with reading the transaction log. Maybe there's just a lot of stuff in there, you're not backing it up often enough, and so the amount of data it has to go through is bigger. Mirroring availability groups and those can add to replication latency because everything gets stored in the transaction log.
All right. So I realize I missed this very small question from Greg, so I will give him some attention. He said he saw some tweets recently that stated you should have 4 cores per NUMA node. What do we think about that?
Somebody was pulling your leg. It's not configurable. It just comes down to, for Intel processors, it's the number of cores per processor. If you turn on hyperthreading, it's going to suddenly magically double. There are differences under virtualization. Unfortunately, it's such a huge topic you can't possibly say you should always have 4 cores. It depends a lot on the host hardware that you're using and whether or not that hardware is identical across all of the hosts in your cluster. But yeah, anybody who just says 4, that they're oversimplifying something, or it might have been just for one particular guy's setup, like if one guy just had one host design.
All right, yay for answers where people are pulling your leg. Okay. Samuel wants to.
Glasses.
This question panel for you guys. I mean, I've got Mega Monitor, 2+ feet away from me, and the question panel is smaller than your faces.
Yeah.
Make it bigger.
Even it's as big as it goes. I'm being exaggerating.
Yeah, the font doesn't change if you expand the window.
But I still have to squint, and I had to put some extra light. Anyways, we're getting distracted. Samuel wants to know, what is the best way to create a SQL Server CMDB/inventory without buying third-party software?
I don't know what that is.
Configuration management. Idera just had a new tool, and if you go to idera.com and click on free tools, I want to say it's Inventory Manager. It's got something along the names of inventory in it, or it's not Discovery, but it's something along the lines of inventory. So Idera's, go to Idera and click on free tools. The other thing to search for is Dell Discovery Wizard. Dell Discovery Wizard will go through and survey your network and discover SQL servers and identify them for you, put them into a database. Another tool that you can use is SQL PowerDoc. SQL PowerDoc is an open source PowerShell script from Kendall Van Dyke. And if I had to pick one that I like, I've used Dell Discovery Wizard a bunch of times. Idera's looks pretty easy as well. SQL PowerDoc, not very easy, but super powerful.
Very good. Okay. Eli has a question about availability groups, since Brent Ozar 2 isn't here. They're planning on upgrading from 2008 R2 to 2014 to take advantage of availability groups. They would like to know if there's a performance advantage to having databases spread across multiple AGs instead of one single AG. His example is having the primary on one AG, but be on a different node than another primary to take advantage of the hardware.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. The first part of your sentence question, there is no advantage to spreading them across multiple AGs unless you are putting the principal, the primary on a separate replica. But you do have licensing implications in that case.
First licensing, always out to get you.
That was a smart question. I'm glad he said move the split around different primaries, because I was like, no, there's no advantage. Oh, you got it.
Yeah, there's an advantage there.
Tricky wording there. Kimberly, welcome back. Haven't seen you in a bit. She is installing SQL Server 2008 R2 on Windows Server 2012 R2. This is compatible based on MS-DOCS she checked. However, she's getting the, quote, external component has thrown an exception error. What is she missing?
I wonder if there's a prerequisite that you need to install first. At least on older versions of SQL Server and Windows, it was supported on newer versions of Windows, but you had to install something first. I don't remember what it was, and I don't know that that's why you're encountering this error. This is the type of thing that I'd probably open up a support case with Microsoft.
The other thing, I'd go download that, whatever the ISO file or the exe that you got for the download, go download it again and just save it to another place and try it again. Because I've gotten so many funky setup errors just from a corrupted ISO file. And then when I go and get another ISO, like, boop, works perfectly. I'd also say anytime you get I'm kind of paranoid like this, but anytime that you get an error during setup, I'd rather wipe Windows and start again. I'm paranoid. I want to build something that's going to last forever. So if you're having repeated errors on the same Windows box, hey, go download a new ISO and then try again on a fresh install of Windows.
And you can go through the setup logs to see if there's a better error, because that's probably a pretty generic error. Problem with the setup logs is it's hard to find the errors. Scroll all the way to the bottom, and then you might have to start scrolling back up to see the failure, because even though it failed, it might have done a lot of extra work afterwards, and all of that's going to be logged.
There's like 50 million instances of the word error in the log.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's awful.
I do like the trick that I learned about filtering the Windows log, starting here during triage. I had no idea about that, and then one day when I watched you do triage and you right-clicked on the left sidebar, I was like, what? I only knew. Because half of the time during triage, I have to ask the client to move my head because it's always floating right over the filter log on the right panel in Windows Event, so that happens a lot. I've been trying to work around not asking them to move my head because it sounds weird to me. Since we're talking about a lot of software, let's ask another question from Scott. Do we have any suggestions on source control software? When Richie's not here, of course.
Yeah, I was going to say, Brent and Richie love Git.
So there's two ways you can do this. One is you can do source control before you deploy your code, meaning you go make a stored procedure change, you check the code into GitHub or Subversion or TFS, whatever tool you want to use. That's proactive. Then you go deploy the code after you've checked it in. Man, almost nobody does that. Plus, two, you end up having DBAs who need to change indexes in production or need to make an emergency change. So the other way you can do it is reactive source code control, which means this tool goes out and looks at your SQL Server every X number of hours and then grabs any changes and checks them into source control. So this gives you a post-mortem log of everything that changed, but not who did it and not the exact time that it changed. I am personally a fan of reactive source control as a DBA. I don't really care as much about who did it, but I want what was changed. I want a breadcrumb list of everything that changed on objects. So Redgate source control for SQL Server has that ability that they'll just go through and patrol your SQL Server periodically and check in any changes. It's just not the source control that your developers are used to. That proactive change control is really, really hard.
We did both proactive and reactive at my last job. We used Visual Studio's Team Foundation server. Anytime we did a deployment of the application, that was always proactive. And then of course DBAs, are having to make changes. And the DBAs were supposed to go in and do a schema compare and then update TFS. That didn't always happen. Other tasks were more important. So there were, whoever the next person was to touch that database, when they did the schema compare to create the deployment scripts, they would see that there's these other things that shouldn't be in my deployment that they've already been deployed to production but weren't in source control. And then besides that, though, because you could have databases you never touch again, so besides that, twice a year they went through and did a schema compare against all databases and got them up to date.
Scott asks, I didn't know about reactive source control. Who makes it? It's a technique, not a product. It's just part of Redgate's source control as well. I think I even still have a blog post on our blog about how you do it with a batch file. Like I wrote a batch file in VB script to do it with Visual Source Safe. I need to burn that in a fire. So
that sounds complicated. That somebody's going to try and totally mess up. Yeah. Okay. That's cool. I was about to ask Tara if you could do them together, so that's cool that you have seen them both together, because I was like, I feel like one place we didn't consider indexes, we didn't let developers change indexes, so if a DBA throws them in and then doesn't check it in, that would be great to have the reactive right there.
Yeah.
All right.
As long as you have a schema compare option, in the tool that you use, or you can get another schema compare, then you can see what the changes are between source control and your database.
Very cool. Okay, so JH wants to know what is the fastest and or safest way of exporting a large table and then re-importing it in maintaining its primary key auto identity seed ID. ... Select star into temp table from large table or bulk copy out or something else.
Look at Michael J. Swart. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you the terms to Google for. Modifying a table online. Michael J. Swart. S-W-A-R-T. So because you said fastest, Michael has an interesting set of blog posts. It's like a 5-part blog post on how you go set up the new table, how you build something to keep the old and new table in sync, and then you move data across in batches. So this way, end users notice very minimal downtime, and yet you're able to keep the two in sync as you get larger. The only time I would go that route is if the business told me, you cannot take any downtime, we're willing to let you put a whole lot of development work into it, and it's more than, like, say, 50 gigs in one table. If it's less than 50 gigs in one table, I would probably just do a select with a tab lock and, you know, move the data across that way.
And then you can use the identity insert option to handle the identities. That way you keep the values the same between the two tables. So set identity underscore insert on, and you can only have one table at a time do this, so make sure you set it off when you're done.
That's a perfect follow into Paul's question. He has existing replication where he wants to change the identity management of primary keys have identity 1.1. He wants to change the primary keys to identify 1.2 on the publisher and identity 0.2 on the subscriber. Is there a way to do this without recreating the tables?
You do have the identity. Yeah, you do have the DBCC command where you can change the seed, but I don't think that you can change the increment.
Yeah.
Usually in a scenario like this, though, what people do is they have the publisher, it's inserting positive numbers, and then on the subscriber inserting negative numbers. So you'd have, if it's an integer, you'd have 2 billion. You could have 2 billion rows for the subscriber and 2 billion rows on the publisher, and that's usually satisfies most tables. Otherwise, go to big int.
Mm-hmm. And so there's the DBCC command to reseed the identity. I cannot remember for the life of me what the syntax is, but if you search for that.
Yeah,
so
I think it's current ident is the command.
Yeah, and you just run that on the one where you want to change them.
Good info. Samuel wants to know, is it best practice to always add checksum when taking backups?
Did you do that when you were a DBA?
I didn't. Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, you do. Both of you know. Yeah. So you
I didn't know it existed.
I don't think most people do.
I mean, I knew it existed. Did we do it? Probably not. I mean, it does add overhead to the backups, and we were, at least a lot of the critical systems, we would always, not always, but we would have a backup restore system. So we were testing our backups regardless. So do you need checksum if you are going to be testing your backups?
Yeah, I learned about it after I got started consulting. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting idea. And I went on a little quest of, I'm going to get everybody to do checksum on their backups. And I put it in SP Blitz as a warning. Hey, you're not doing checksums on your backups. And universally, people were like, what is that? Why would I want my backups to go slower? So I took it out as a recommendation just because people don't like their backups going slower.
Does Ola's solution, does it do the checksum by default?
Not by default.
Not by default,
I think it does.
Oh, does it?
Because I've been playing around. Yesterday, I was playing around. Let me double check my savings here. But I ran the scripts default and then took a look. So would have to double check, but it's included as an option at the very least.
And doesn't his do verify by default too out of the box?
Yeah, maybe it does verify by default and not checksum by default, but the verify, I mean, the one thing I don't think people think of is how it can impact, because you might be like, oh, my 1 gig backup is taking 20 minutes. I don't know. But it's because it's just doing the restore verify only command against the backup it just took. So it's just saying, oh, is this still a valid backup? And like at the basic level, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's only saying, oh yes, I can open this as a file. I don't know its validity inside, just that it could reopen it as needed. So that's just something to be considerate of. It's not the saving grace. Oh, I did verify only. We're good.
And it could be all corrupt data in there. It could be 100% corrupt. Then the way you're going to have to find out is to run CheckDB.
Yeah. All right. I don't understand.
We got all kinds of questions coming in.
I know, they're definitely falling in now. Okay, so Andrew says they've been having issues with data not showing up in reports for sometimes up to 15 minutes. They're an OLTP shop running 2012 web. Is this possibly a thing with SQL, or is it due to something else?
I think we would need more information as to
Yeah.
how is the data getting into this database? Is it queuing? Is there a backlog in say a TIBCO queue or something like that? Or you talk about reporting. Do you have a replicated system or in availability groups? Readable secondary. Maybe there's a delay in getting the data to those. But I don't think we have enough information to answer it.
Yeah,
It's
I agree.
it's never normal to do an insert in SQL Server, commit your transaction, and then not have it be available for a select immediately.
Yeah. All right, let's see what David has to say. He's getting this on a server with 4x1 gig temp data, 8 gig temp log, insufficient space to hold in TempDB to hold row versions. Need to shrink the version store to free up some space in TempDB.
That's a pretty small TempDB. I've supported TempDBs that were half a terabyte in size just because we had business users running ridiculous queries. So first of all, why is your TempDB so small? Are you shrinking it down? Maybe you probably need some more space. Version store, are you running read committed snapshot isolation level? So you need more space for TempDB.
And then how much space do you need? Generally, if somebody puts a gun to my head and just says, go pick a number, I'm going to go with 25% of the size of all the databases combined. So if you have, say, 100 gigs on the database server, you probably need at least 25 gigs for TempDB.
We had because a few jobs ago we had set up hundreds and hundreds of servers, and so we just made a policy, and TempDB we set at 70 gigabytes. These were shared servers with lots of databases, and we didn't know what was going to occur on them, and we would have alerts to warn us if the data files or log file was creeping up on if they were going to fill up, so we could react to those. But 70 gigabytes for the all of the TempDB data files, and I believe 30 gigabytes for the TempDB log file. That was just our default.
I don't get out of bed for less than 70 gigs.
Silly. Okay. Ronnie supports about 25 prod and dev databases as a DBA. He's not in the Corp Windows DBA group and does not have access to all of the tools, monitoring performance, etc. Whatever. All monitoring I have in place is based on scripts that run and report issues. Will the lack of experience working with the tools like that hurt my chances with pursuing a new DBA job? I know it really depends on what the hiring manager is looking for, but is knowing tools like that an important skill to have?
I don't think it's an important skill necessarily. I think it's going to obviously depend company to company. But if you don't have any experience with monitoring tools, I think that's fine as long as your other experience, your actual SQL Server experience is what they're looking for. You can get up to speed on these tools, I wouldn't say fairly quickly, but you can at least click around and figure things out and with some guidance, get some pretty in-depth knowledge of these tools. I don't think that, for the most part, I don't think that companies are paying for tools like this. So I think that it's pretty rare that companies have these tools in place.
Yeah, unless you're going to a large DBA shop, I don't feel like you're probably going to have very many of these tools.
And you'd have to know all of them. I mean, if you only knew one and somebody doesn't use that one, you're screwed. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say it's not the same thing as not knowing SQL Server versus MySQL versus Oracle. They all run pretty similarly, and nobody expects you to know all of them, or they're only going to hire you if you know this one. Like if you only know Redgate, great, because they're a Redgate shop. That's usually not the case.
Yeah. When we do interviewing for consultants, for example, so when we go and hire people, we will often give them a virtual machine and say, now take remote control of this thing, show me why it's slow, or troubleshoot why this query isn't working. And if someone comes to me and says, well, I'm sorry, all I can do is use a tool, like I only ever troubleshoot this with Dell or IDEA or Redgate, and I'm lost without a third-party tool, man, you're not going to do well as a consultant because we can't rely on those tools either. When we parachute in, man, I have no idea what's going to be happening on the other end. So it pays better to know the native ways to doing things.
All right, I think we have probably time for one more question. Did you guys see anyone while I scroll back and look?
Greg says he remembers that the tweets about TempDB stuff was 4 TempDB files per NUMA node. They were smoking weed too. I don't know who that was.
They must be in Portland.
Yeah, Denver, something like
that. Someone chimes in. Eli says the SP who is active is your friend about the monitoring to you, Ronnie. So that is a good point.
We love active in the Blitz stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, free tools. Pro tip, if you're going to apply for work at our company, you may want to try using our tools. At least know that they're out there. If you come in and use someone else's tools, it will not be a good time for you.
Yeah, I agree. Okay.
Not that you ever need to know how to use our tools to work here. We teach you those two after you get here. But
yeah. I feel like there was one that Yeah, there's a couple that are like.
I think he wants. The 20
he really wants me to read his question.
Yes.
Wes, I'm going to tell you my answer is SQL Server pays our bills. So Wes wants to know what our thoughts are on Postgres versus Microsoft SQL Server.
Oh,
SQL Server.
Awesome.
We're SQL Server professionals, so our answer is SQL Server. If you want me to support your system, I don't do Postgres SQL, so I can't support it. I could probably learn it, but I don't really have any interest in learning it.
I see. I don't support it either, but I always try to learn about other stuff, and there's stuff that's really cool about Postgres. Unlogged tables is a classic example. If you search for Postgres on our site, we've written a couple blog posts about different features in Postgres that we would want in SQL Server. But boy, at the same time, I kind of like parallelism. Man, Microsoft SQL Server has had parallelism for a long, long time. That's kind of nice in today's huge multi-core environments where 16 cores isn't a big deal, 32 cores isn't a big deal anymore. Parallelism is pretty freaking awesome. And they're iterating super fast. So, yeah, I kind of like Microsoft SQL Server if I was going to start a career from scratch. So, like, Microsoft is where it's at in the enterprise environment, and Postgres is where it's at in the startup environment. Well, thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us today, and we will see you guys next week.